Welcome back to another episode of The Founder, a show that features entrepreneurs and their early stories of ingenuity, struggle, and perseverance to get their companies off the ground. We do our best to capture the uncensored, uncovered look behind the curtain into what founders really face when getting started. I'm your host, Kallaway. Our founder guest on today's episode grew up in the Bay Area and always had the entrepreneurial itch. Whether it was his paper route or baseball card shop, he was always hustling and realized he loved building things, a characteristic that would serve him well throughout his career. After pursuing competitive hockey on the East Coast during boarding school and college, he was ready to enter the business world and immediately gravitated towards startups. He spent time in the early days at a couple of companies before founding Gift, a digital solution for gift cards that he sold the First Data Corporation in 2014. After a few years thinking about what's next, he realized there was a major gap in the market for banking products optimized for kids and families in the digital age. That was the initial spark for Step. Today at Step, this founder and his team are revolutionizing banking and financial literacy for the next generation. Step was built specifically for teenagers, so anyone 13 and up is eligible to enroll. When a new user signs up, they'll receive access to a free FDIC-insured bank account and Visa card. Step's goal is to become the first step in the financial journey and not only provide easier access to send and receive money, but also educate the next generation on the fundamentals of personal finance. After a closed beta period with rave reviews from early users, Step launched publicly with support and endorsement from TikTok star Charli D'Amelio a couple of weeks ago. Safe to say they are off to a fast start. This is an inspiring interview that highlights the future of financial services for the digital age and how new companies are rethinking products and experiences from the ground up. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Now introducing the founder of Step, MacDonald. Let's get it. CJ, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's awesome to be here.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to talking with you today. So before we dive into the origin story and how you kind of built your career through Gift and Step, I'd love to start with just an anchor point of where the business is today. So for Step, can you walk us through kind of what the mission and vision is for the company, how big it is in terms of employees or revenues or whatever KPI you use to measure growth, just to give people a flavor for what you do today?
Yeah, so thanks for having me again. Step, we've built a next generation money and banking platform. Our mission is to really educate the next generation just to be smarter with money. Money is one of those crucial life skills that schools don't really teach you, and a lot of parents and families don't talk about money. But you really have to have an understanding of how it works in order to live. So we saw a gap in the market with large banks kind of not tailoring towards families and specifically the younger generation, and wanted to basically, build a better banking platform and kind of start with that first bank account and first spending card. And that's really, what Step is. And our mission, like I said, is to educate this next generation just to be better with money.
Yeah. And so walk us through the process. If I'm a teenager, or if I'm a parent of a teenager, what does the product look like today for my teenager?
Yeah. So it's an FDIC insured bank account. There's a mobile app. It's free to use. We built a secured Visa spending card. So you get a card that you can spend whatever money you have in your account. You can load that card into Apple Pay right away when you sign up. You can set up an account in less than 2 minutes. And I think a good way to think about it is, if you look at Gen Z and millennials, everybody uses Venmo, Cash App, to send and receive money. The problem with Venmo or Cash App is A, you're supposed to be 18 years to be on those platforms, 18 years old. And B, you really need to have an underlying bank account attached to Venmo in order to link and get money in and money out. And most 13 and 14-year-olds don't have a bank account. And so what we did was we kind of took the best of Venmo and the best of, Wells Fargo or Chase, and we brought those together and created first of its kind all-in-one solution that basically brings peer-to-peer with an FDIC-insured bank account and a spending card.
That's awesome. I'm sure an initial question you got in the early days is like, does a Step user have to only send money to another Step user, right? If one person has Venmo and one person has the Step account, does it still work that way?
You can link a Step account to Venmo. You can link a Step account to Cash App. You can link a Step account to Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Chase.
Gotcha.
All of our accounts have routing and account numbers. So you can link through, a routing and account
Yeah,
number,
super flexible.
your step account, and we're flexible. Like if we know that some people are going to need to use Venmo or Cash App or want to, spend or use outside of our platform. Currently today to send and receive money, one needs to be on the Step platform to use the P2P send and receive. But we're opening it up to non-Step users being able to send Step users money, and then non-Step users being able to receive money, on the Step platform as well.
Yeah, I think that provides a really good anchor point. I'm pumped to get into it. So let's rewind the clock a bit. As fast or as slow as you'd like, take us through your life and background and kind of, growing up and where you went to school, and then kind of what you were working on through Gift, and take us all the way up to kind of starting Step.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I grew up in the Bay Area, born and raised. Huge San Jose Sharks fan, Warriors fan, Giants fan, Niners fan, big sports guy. I actually grew up playing ice hockey in California, which is not very common. And when I was 15 years old, I was traveling all over the world playing hockey. And, I wanted to continue to play. And my parents sat me down one day and ultimately said, hey, if you really want to play and excel at this sport, we probably got to look at getting you out of California and, either going somewhere in the Northeast or Canada. And so we looked at lots of different options. And, what made the most sense was to go to a boarding school back in the Northeast where I could get a higher level of education and I could also excel and play sports at the highest level. And, I ended up going back to a boarding school in Connecticut called Westminster. Great experience. And, I got to play soccer, hockey, lacrosse. And hockey is ultimately what drove me to want to go back east. But, having this higher level of education, expanding my network with, some great people. Some of my closest friends are, from my boarding school. It was just a great all-around experience. The intimacy with, faculty members, like smaller classes. It was, not only athletic, it was not only educational. I think it really helped, round me as a human being. And I think that's super important in life. I've got 2 young kids, and I always talk about, obviously you want them to be book smart, but I want them to be street smart. I want them to excel in whatever that is, whether it's, creative direction, athletic direction. Like, I just want them to be passionate about something in life. And I feel like my experience going back east, it just opened my eyes a little bit to the world. And, I had my friends at home and my family that was always going to be there, but I met some new people, halfway across the US, and I did that. And I wanted to continue playing hockey in school, in college. So I ended up going to Wesleyan University, which is in Connecticut. And I played hockey there and studied and had a great experience there as well. And I've always had an entrepreneurial background. And, I had a paper route for 6 years growing up. I had a baseball card shop in my parents' garage where I used to, trade and sell baseball cards. I had shoe boxes of cash under my bed for a while. And, it's one of those things where I knew I wanted to tap my kind of entrepreneurial background. And really, when I dove into the business world, I've always loved to build things. And, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur and a CEO that, led product, led, people, and built like really exciting things. And so when I graduated from Wesleyan, I got into the whole startup ecosystem and, started kind of building companies and products. And that's what I've been doing for most of my career.
For people who haven't heard of Gift, obviously it was a huge success, but was that your first business that you built, or had you started a couple startups before that?
So I'd been early stage at a few startups before that. Right out of school, I was pretty early on at a company called LiveOps. And, it was an awesome learning experience for me where I got to work with some remarkable people. I joined early enough there where I kind of got to see the inner makings of a company, a product, a business at a very early stage. And I had just great mentors and a great learning experience. I actually, after 5 years, I left there with the founding engineering team of that company. And we built a company called Luminate, which was a image recognition platform. And this was back in 2008.
Ahead of its time.
It was ahead of its time. It was pre-Instagram and pre-camera phones, of any quality. And so it was one of those things where there were trillions of images online, static images, a lot less than what there is today with camera phones and social media. But we built an image recognition platform to pull contextually relevant information from pictures online, and we had a network of about 10,000 publisher websites that we worked with that would use our technology ultimately to surface a contextually relevant experience around images, where you could either buy similar products to what you saw in the photo or get information about something that you saw, on the page or in the photo. So, I was there from, pretty much the early days of building that out. And I was brought onto the team ultimately to bring the product to market, figure out, monetization path and strategy, and start signing up, all of our early customers. And again, it's kind of like I went earlier stage than even at Live Ops and got this unbelievable, MBA in terms of building a company at a very early age in my career. But was fortunate there to work with a lot of the folks from Live Ops that I had worked with in the past. And, we built that up and saw some early success. We ended up selling that business to Yahoo back when Yahoo was somewhat relevant and cool. And, after that, I kind of started thinking about what was next for me. And, I got married in 2011. I got a lot of gift cards for my wedding. As a consumer, I was frustrated with the idea of managing and handling plastic gift cards. I knew nothing about the gift card business or industry other than there were a lot of gift cards out there. And so on my honeymoon, I started researching, the gift card space, and a few things popped out. One, it was $100 billion market at the time, strictly in the US. Two, it was predominantly plastic physical gift cards. And three, I always thought that retailers loved it when the breakage model, when I gave you a gift card and you didn't use it, like I thought they loved, the fact that they could just keep the money and they didn't have to sell you products. But in 2010, they passed some laws that A, said gift cards can no longer expire. B, said you can't charge people for gift cards. There used to be like monthly fees on the gift cards when they sat there. So you can't do that anymore. And then three, that the retailer can't recognize the revenue until the gift card's actually redeemed. So my theory of, retailers love the fact that gift cards were sitting in junk drawers. They actually didn't, because they couldn't recognize that revenue until you used it. So it sat as a liability on their books. And so the idea of the gift card does the consumer no good sitting in a junk drawer, and it does the retailer no good sitting in a junk drawer. How do we get this, onto your phone and have a digital experience where we could remind you and say, hey, don't forget you've got, a gift card to Nordstrom's. You're at the mall right now. Come in today and use it. And maybe we did a partnership, with a retailer and said you get 10% off if you use your card. So, for me, it was getting married and writing thank you notes and thanks for the gift card, that I just got interested in the gift card space. I was introduced through a mutual friend to my co-founder at Gift, and we kind of came together and started the company and learned a lot, and built it up pretty quickly and had some early success. Became thought leaders in the gift card space. We were taking a totally different approach. We ended up selling that business to First Data Corporation back in 2014. And I spent a couple of years at First Data, learning as much as I possibly could before leaving and figuring out what was next.
Yeah, it's a great story, especially about on the honeymoon, figuring out, that space and just diving into it. So I think, shifting to Step in the origins, I would say you guys at Step are probably one of the foremost thought leaders on like the Gen Z demographic in terms of understanding behavior. What have you learned over time, over this journey so far about, what makes that demographic different? I think there's generalizations that people would, apply to it, but really diving deep into it, what have you learned and where did that light bulb moment come from to start Step?
Yeah, I think so. It was a few things. I mean, the light bulb moment I'll talk about first. It was one, my kids. So I have two young kids, and I really started thinking about like trying to bring them up, like I said, well-rounded and a good understanding of life, right? And money is just one of those things that, like I said earlier, you kind of have to understand money in order to live, right? It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. Like, we all have bills, right? Like, we all need to put a roof over our head. We need to put clothes on our back. We need to eat. And, there's this balance between spending and savings. And if you're fortunate enough, like giving back. And, I started looking at my kids, and my parents would come over, for birthday parties or the holidays. And, I'd get the call a week before all of these events. And my mom or my sisters would ask, what could we get your kids for the holidays or for their birthdays? And the answer was nothing. Just be there for them and be there with them. That's all that they need is their family. They don't need anything. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I don't want any more toys or books or things around the house because they have so much stuff already, right? But I started like thinking about my upbringing there, where my grandfather actually used to give my sisters and I U.S. savings bonds. And they were paper certificates, double E series bonds, and like clockwork. He would, a week before every holiday and every birthday, we'd get a box in the mail with a nice handwritten note with a wrapped box, and inside of it there was just a piece of paper that was a bond that said $50. And all I knew was it was money that maybe I could use down the road, but I couldn't touch it now. So I just give it to my parents, and my parents would just stick it in their kitchen junk drawer.
Yeah, I did the same thing.
It sat there, A, collecting dust, B, not secure. Like if there was ever a fire or someone broke into the house, they could have taken those things out of the drawer and went to the bank and cashed them. And, I didn't really understand what my grandfather was doing. But as I got a little bit more mature and started to get older, and as I went to college, and my senior year in college, I actually bought my first house. And I attribute the fact that I was able to purchase a house. I had no money. I had no job. I had no credit, right? But I had like $10,000 in savings bonds that I had collected over the years from my grandfather. And, I used those as a down payment on a house. I put down like 2 or 3% on this house. I used those, bonds as part of my down payment. And, like 14 months later, I sold the house, for $100,000+ more than what I bought it for. I moved back to the Bay Area. I used that as a down payment for a house in the Bay Area. And I tell you that background and story because I don't think I don't know if I ever would have been able to get into the real estate game that early if it wasn't for the bonds that my grandfather gave me. And I really appreciate what he was doing, where he was investing in my future. And so I wanted to be able to do that for my kids. And so when I started looking around at what was out there, like double E series bonds don't exist, US savings bonds don't exist anymore. And, I don't think that, a paper certificate would be the right solution for kids these days anyways, when everything's digital. And I started looking at ideas to be able to offer to my parents to give to my kids for their birthdays and stuff. And I wanted them to invest in their future and not show up with, a toy or a book that they were going to give away in 6 months. And that was, I guess, the starting point and the light bulb moment for me of like doing a lot of research on what was out there when it, pertained to financial products and as it pertained to bank accounts. And I started looking at 529 plans and how those work exactly. And I started looking at, savings accounts. I started going to the movie theaters on Friday night at 6 o'clock to observe how teenagers were, not only hanging out, but interacting with money. Like, were they paying with cash, or was it a card? Was it a debit or a credit card? Was it in their name or their parents' name? Did they get allowances or not? Like, I really wanted to put myself in their shoes firsthand and understand this next generation as well as this demographic, because I've been out of high school for 20+ years. And for me, the more research I did, I started conducting focus groups, with teenagers, with parents, with college students. And I just started asking all these questions around money. And it just became clear that there was this gap in the ecosystem where large financial institutions don't really tailor well towards families, and they don't really tailor well towards teenagers. And they have products that they kind of put lipstick on their mobile app and said, hey, this is your teen checking account, which, to get back to your original question of like, how does Gen Z work when it pertains to this, and what research have we done, and how do we feel that we can be successful in this demographic, is I think we've spent a lot of time really trying to understand, how they think, products and services and features that they will value, and build to them, not just basically put lipstick on something that's been around for years and give it to them.
Yeah, and I want to touch on that specifically with the product piece and the evolution. It's such a crazy time for this, especially this space. Like, we have a financial literacy problem in all ages. I feel like I didn't have the opportunity to learn anything like this. And when you combine, there's never been more access to e-commerce. There's never been more of an emphasis on like having stuff. Like, if you're a 13 to 15-year-old kid, like the culture of like having really expensive clothes and expensive technology, that didn't exist when we were kids. And that combination with the lack of financial literacy is a really like crazy storm. So I think there's never been a better time for what you're doing. And, to transition from that, I'd love to hear like the product evolution today. And when you first started, what were the features that you targeted, to your point, based on the research, and kind of in 3 to 5 years, what do you want that platform and product to look like?
Yeah, great question. So it's interesting, right? Like, when we first started working on it, like, the idea was more around essentially like a savings page or a savings account that ultimately grandma and grandpa could contribute towards, hence, like my grandfather's story and whatnot. And we think that there's absolutely something there, but that's just more of a feature, right? We view that as a feature. And what we wanted to build was a business. And so when we really started to dive into the business aspect of it, like, what became more and more clear as we did research and talked to more and more people was that I fundamentally believe that the foundation of your financial journey starts with your bank account, right? And it's getting that, like I said, first bank account, first spending card at an earlier age, and anchoring that as the foundation around money, right? So what does that look like? It's got to be free, right? Because it's not really fair to charge a monthly fee or a minimum balance to a child or a teenager, because they don't have that much money. They don't make that much money. They don't spend that much money. So to pay a monthly fee seems predatory to me. And that's what traditional banks do. They charge these fees and they operate off a fee model. The average, consumer in the US pays about $350 a year in banking fees. And it's hard, like I said, to ask a parent that doesn't make a lot of money or a child that doesn't have a lot of money, to pay a $15 a month or a $10 a month fee. And so we wanted to build that anchor foundation of a bank account, right? That was FDIC insured, that was mobile first. We don't believe that there's a need anymore to go into branches. So we don't have the overhead of a traditional bank, where there's branches and tellers and, a lot of operational overhead that obviously somebody has to pay for, which is why some of these fees come into place. But if we remove those operational aspects, it becomes easier to A, not have to charge, and B, be able to even give back or reward our customers as a thank you for trusting us with their money and for working with us, as their bank partner, right? And so we think a lot about rewarding our customers, for experiences, for being a valued customer and using the platform. We think that having a spending vehicle, like, in order to spend in today's modern day economy, like you and I talked about it, like, we grew up on cash. Cash doesn't work anymore for today's lifestyle, right? Like, all the services that you and I use every single day, Uber, maybe not as much so today, but Amazon, the App Store, DoorDash, like, these all require you to have either a debit card, a credit card, Apple Pay, or Google Pay in order to purchase, right? You can't go with a $20 bill and buy something, on the App Store. And that's no different for teenagers or Gen Z. The difference being with them is they grew up in a mobile world, and so they just expect you to hit a button in for a car to show up at your house, or for you to hit a button in for groceries to show up at your house, or for you to, like, say you ran out of something and ordered on Amazon and it shows up hours later, right? Like, I mean, My daughter's 7 now, but I remember even when she was 4 or 5, Daddy, just order it on Amazon. It'll be here this afternoon. Right. And there's this instant gratification that, has come in today's society that's purchasing as well. Right. You look at all the retailers, they're all trying to figure out how to keep up with Amazon with same day delivery. Right. And my point being is cash doesn't work for all of these services. And so the ability to have a spending vehicle that is easily accessible for a teenager is really important. And so we built the bank account, we built the card. We know that P2P of being able to send and receive money, whether that's inter-family or whether that's amongst your family and friends, is a huge need and value proposition. And so we kind of built that into the core product. And that's where I believe, again, the foundation starts. And then we'll build on there and start, using some of these purchasing or decisioning moments, to educate you about money. We'll start being able to budget and group how and where you spend your money so you can start to visually just see it. And we'll just start to talk to you about, smart money making, moves and decisions as you grow.
That's awesome. And a lot of that's on the, I guess, product side. From like the financial literacy and fluency side, have you built programs to like crash courses to take these Gen Z users through, money management? Or is it more like inherently through the usage of your foundational products, the bank account, the card, they're learning those things over time?
Yeah. So right now it's the latter. Right now it's basically the usage and having, the platform to kind of build off of. We 100% are going to lean into the financially literacy aspect of all of this and start to build some of those tools and features into the product on top of that. We're launching a whole new website this week, and there's going to be a money 101 section on it. And that's also a content hub for us to start, putting out just topics around money that are real things that, we want to be viewed as experts when it pertains to money and kind of setting a strong financial path, whether it's for your child or, as a child, so you can kind of continue to grow. And each step of your journey in life, we offer relevant financial products and services. So, we'll continue to invest in content. We'll continue to invest in, financial literacy that furthers our mission to really help this next generation.
Yeah, no, it's definitely an exciting time and definitely a holistic picture. A topic that I'd love to get into on the show is around kind of marketing and customer acquisition and like different tactics that you've used. For this business in particular, it's interesting because there's a quote unquote D2C playbook with different ideas that have worked, but a lot of those assume that it's someone who has a credit card or shops online, right? And the consumers that you're targeting are often younger. So what has been kind of the marketing strategy? Are you going for the parents? Are you using certain social channels to get the preteen, teen users? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So, it's interesting, right? We thought about this a lot, and every financial service company that's out there, right? So traditional banks, Venmo, you've got all the fintechs that have popped up. You've got all the challenger banks that have popped up. Everybody is going after kind of this 18 plus market, right? So what does that mean? It means from a customer acquisition cost, like it's expensive, right? Like they're all driving up costs on Facebook and Instagram and, on, Google, like in terms of search, like, and on the App Store, because they're all going after the same demographic. And a lot of them have a slightly different wedge or entry point into the market, but at the end, they're all trying to get to the core banking side of things, right? We think that there's absolutely, an opportunity there. And in our world, that's targeting the parent, right? Or someone that's over the age of 18 to bank with Step. And so our approach was kind of, let's do a bottom up where we target the teen directly and have the teen bring the idea to mom and dad. Or we can do a top down where we target the parent and the parent kind of brings the idea to their child. It's two totally different approaches where where we would attract these demographics are different places, right? Like most teenagers are not on Facebook and most parents are not on TikTok. And so it's this kind of generational gap of even where and how we consume media. Our value prop to a parent is much different than our value prop to a teen. Our value prop to a parent is trust and security and financial literacy and jumpstarting your child's financial future. The teen doesn't care as much about that stuff. The teen just wants, they want to be cool. They want a card, and they want to feel like it's theirs. And so this is where I think the psychological aspect of kind of our marketing and our go-to-market strategy has been from day one is we wanted the team to take that sense of ownership and responsibility and feel connected to it and feel like it was theirs. It was their idea, and they're the ones that went to mom and dad versus the other way around. If a teen wants something, they're going to be a lot more persistent. Like mom, dad, everyone at school's got a step card or has a step account. Like, I want it, I need it, where it's just kind of another to do in a lot of cases for the parent, where they know they need or want to get a bank account for their kid, but it's not a top priority. So they kind of put it to the side and they'll do it over the course of the next couple of months, maybe. And so, we kind of early on said, obviously, we wanted to make sure from a legal, regulatory, and compliance standpoint, we were totally buttoned up, but we wanted to make sure if there was an appropriate, responsible path to, somehow trying to build a relationship and catch the attention of somebody under the age of 18, that what would be the best way to do that. And so we built the product where either a teen or a parent can sign up first, and they can invite, one or the other. A teen doesn't need to have a parent just to set up an account. It would be a very basic account where, they can't, it's not an FDIC insured bank account. They can't get a card if they're under the age of 18 without mom or dad kind of approving their account. But they can sign up and they can invite mom and dad to approve their account through SMS right from the app. Or vice versa. Again, the parent can sign up and they can invite the teen via SMS through the app, which will kind of link the account, give the proper approvals for us to open up the card in the account, and they can go from there.
And when you think like top of the funnel, like tactical, either traditional strategies or outside the box. I love asking founders like outside the box marketing that worked. You mentioned like TikTok, and I'm assuming partnering with like influencers on TikTok would have a lot of success. What are some other things you tried just to pique the interest of the teen initially?
Yeah, so a few things. We built a referral program. Like we put out a wait list last year, and we built an app, and you had to sign up for the app and open up an account, and you couldn't do a lot. But the only thing you could actually do was refer your friends and make money. And it was interesting because it was kind of faux money. It was like an IOU, right? Where I invited you, if you signed up under my code, you got $1 for signing up under my code, and I got $1 for referring you. And then if I invited 5 other people, I'd get $1 for each person that signed up, and they would get $1 for signing up under my code. And in the app, we had people that were, basically signing up, in some cases, hundreds of friends, and making hundreds of dollars. They couldn't access that money yet because our bank accounts weren't open. But the theory and thought was, let's see if we could basically spark some interest with this demographic and get them talking about it and get them sharing with their friends. And at the point when the bank account's ready, we'll send them an invite that says, hey, great news, your account's now ready. Here's your $100. And they'd get their $100. The referral program for us was very successful. We got a lot of attention, we got a lot of buzz, and we got a lot of interest just from teens. Where the interesting thing is we had a lot of internal debates where, we were giving away $1 for a sign up, and everyone told us we were crazy and nobody would do anything for $1. It had to be 5 or 10. But my theory was you can start at $1 and always go up to 2 or 5 or 10, but it's very difficult to go from 10 to 5 to 2 to 1. And so we started at $1, and it just became very clear, like for a 14-year-old in, Iowa to post, a few snaps and a few Instagram stories with their code. And we had a lot of teens that were even putting their step referral link in their Instagram bios. But for them to just do that, and in some cases make 20, 50 or a few $100, like that's real money.
That's massive.
Right. And for us, it's its awareness and hopefully some new customers. And so we built that out, and we found a lot of success there. Obviously social media is a massive kind of opportunity for us given this demographic, where you mentioned, influencers and just content and building like authentic content around money, has proven to be very successful for us as well.
Yeah, I wonder and I'm sure you guys will do this at some point, like what the Udemy or like masterclass version of the Finance 101 like video series, but in a medium like TikTok or some other like social forward way that the teens resonate with. That's going to be massive too at some point. I'm not sure exactly how that would work given the current platforms, but
well, yeah, like I said earlier, teens consume media differently than we do, or than we did growing up, for sure, right? I think that teens don't want to take a test about money. They don't want to like necessarily read a book about how to be good at money. Like a lot of the content is consumed today in these like short, 6-12 second tidbits. And, like we're kind of using our platform as maybe teaching or learning moments where maybe you're about to purchase something and we pop up and say, are you sure? Like, imagine if you saved, $100, you could do X, Y, and Z, or you could save this much money over the course of your lifetime. Like, how can we just kind of gamify the experience to where it's relevant and they understand it and they kind of want to get behind it?
Yeah, there's this idea of like this train the trainer model is really interesting to me. Like a lot of the teenagers resonate with like specific influencers that, other than social media, they're not athletes, they're not industry specific. But if you train them to teach versus someone at your company who has less brand recognition from like a name perspective, I feel like companies aren't doing that a ton today, probably because it's tough to get the influencer to actually spend the time to learn that information and then teach it. There's a lot of opportunity there, I think, too.
I agree with you 100%. And kind of going back to your earlier question, like, I think we've really spent a lot of time the last couple of years trying to understand the demographic, right? Like trying to put ourselves in their shoes and trying to build, like I said, for them and not just fit, a product into this box because we already have it. Like we want to be authentic. We want to, resonate with them, and we want them to just, trust us, right? Like we're asking them to trust us with their money. And so I think it's super important that they feel good about, as a brand who you're working with. And another thing that's really interesting is you kind of you mentioned social media. You look at social media and how that's evolved over the course of like the last 10 plus years, right? Like when Facebook came out, I'll never forget, my sister went to Dartmouth, and Dartmouth was one of the first schools on Facebook. And I remember her senior year in high school, we were at my parents' house and she was on the computer and she was literally on Facebook, like talking to all of her, future dorm mates that she was going to meet, her freshman year that August when she went to school. And I remember her like walking me through Facebook, and this was super early. And my initial thought was, oh, that's for college kids, right? Because the way it was set up, it was like you can communicate with kids on your college campus and, you can post things. And she was literally sitting there having conversations with, the people that she was going to be living on the same floor with a few months later. And then a few months later, like a few friends of mine mentioned Facebook, a few more mentioned it. And it kind of got to a point where it's like, yeah, you got to try it out, get on it. And I'll never forget, like the first week that I signed up for Facebook, I started getting all these random pings from people like from when I went to high school that I hadn't talked to in like 5-10 years. And, obviously Facebook has become a massive platform and has a lot of reach. But you look at this generational shift where Instagram came out, right? And Instagram started to skew slightly younger than Facebook, where, the younger demographic wasn't on Facebook, they were getting on Instagram. And then Snapchat came out and, it got a little bit younger. And then TikTok came out and it got a little bit younger. Now there's Triller. Like there's been this like evolution in social media of like younger generations clamping onto a platform. Like I said, to the point where, Facebook just launched Facebook campuses because I think now they're trying to get back to,
they're trying to circle back
in and work their way up because they've kind of lost any sort of momentum in terms of demographic interest, as it pertains to Gen Z at this point. And obviously, we're not a social media site, and it's tough to compare banking and money with social media. But I think that there's something there with kind of the idea that just because mom and dad banked at Wells Fargo or Chase doesn't mean that their child necessarily has to or wants to bank at Wells Fargo or Bank of America or Chase, because those models are set up for kind of at least our generation plus of, you've got a bank and a branch, and you can go in there and you pay this monthly fee, and this is how it works. And it's just different with the younger generation, and that's really what we're ultimately trying to tailor towards.
It is, yeah. I think the lines are blurring between, like, traditionally it was like banking, social, two different buckets, way on opposite sides. The lines are really blurring now, where I feel like there's like Venmo had a social aspect. There was a feed you could kind of see. Like, I think the lines are really blurring. It's a good transition to a question I wanted to ask you around competition, rather than say like where does Step fit in the market, because I think we've hit that a lot, and it's clear that a lot of the focus in the industry is on that 18 plus segment, and that's not where Step's covering today. I feel like the industry is really unique in that there's a few big behemoths who are trying to be kind of the one-stop shop, right, and consolidate. But then, especially on the investing side, it's getting really fragmented with the Robinhoods and the Wealthfronts and the M1s and all of these different platforms that are coming out and doing different flavors of the same thing. What's your take on, in 10 years, what does the financial services industry look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's going to look a lot different, for sure. I mean, you look at, there's a company in the online mobile banking called Chime. And Chris Britt and Ryan King are good buddies of mine. And we shared office space with them a few years back when I was doing Gift and they were starting Chime. And so I saw kind of early days of Chime, and I've seen them evolve over the years. And I'm just so excited for them because they've built some really cool stuff. And just recently, Chime just raised another $500 million at a almost $15 billion valuation. And I think the last number that they publicly, announced was they had roughly 10 million accounts, right? And, you look at someone like Chime, who 3 years ago, for all intents and purposes, they didn't exist, right? Like, they had a business, they had accounts, but it was relatively small. Within 3 years, they were able to accumulate over 10 million accounts, and they built like a business and a brand. And kudos to them, and they're great people, and I'm super proud of them and excited for them. And, on the same token, look at a company like Robinhood, right? Like Robinhood didn't exist 10 years ago. And Robinhood has over 10 million accounts now. And I think the last stat that I saw there was Robinhood has more accounts than like E-Trade and Schwab combined, right? And it's crazy, but I think it's basically validation that millennials, Gen Z, like, they're not married to some of the legacy providers that have been around forever just because that's where you're supposed to go. I think they're open to change, and they're open to products and services that tailor and fit to them, right? Like, my parents, for example, my mom, she'll ask me, she's done it now, but in the early days when, she got on Venmo and she was trying to link her Wells Fargo account to Venmo, she was so nervous to link,
Right, yeah, like someone's going to steal her money.
Someone's going to steal her money. And it's one of those things where I don't even think about that, right? Like I'm like, I'm going to connect my Wells Fargo account to Venmo because I got to get money into my Venmo account, right? But I think, again, it's just a generational mindset and shift where I grew up kind of, seeing that, and I'm not afraid. I'm super sensitive to my information, my identity and all that stuff, but like, I don't live in fear that someone's going to steal my money or steal my identity. I just protect myself, right? I put 2FA on all my accounts. I make sure that I'm thoughtful in terms of how I live, my life to protect it, but I'm not living it in fear that someone's going to take it. And for sure, generations below me, they have no problem, signing in through Facebook or, Snapchat, or linking their accounts or sharing information or posting photos or videos or content of every single move in their life, right? Like what they're doing.
Yeah,
like,
people don't even think about that as a risk at all.
They don't think about it as a risk. right? And I think it's just different mindsets and different generations.
Yeah, it definitely is. All right, I'm going to shift to some of these other questions. So the first one's around hiring, and I ask this to everyone who comes on. I'd love to get your take on this. My opinion is that hiring is the most important thing you can do, and if you find the superstar talent, they really run the ship for you and really, take leadership roles, push the company forward. And that's one of the most important things you can do as a founder. So for you, what have been the consistent characteristics across the superstar people that you've been able to hire over the years across your multiple companies?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I agree with you 100% that people, are everything. I'm very fortunate and blessed that I get to work with awesome people every day, and I've had the opportunity to work with even at Step. I mean, a lot of the people that are at Step today, we work together at Gift. And there's some people even from my live ops and Luminate days that are now on the Step team, right? And so I very much believe when you're building a company, you are building that foundation for the whole company around the first 25, 50 people. And it's so important. I mean, hiring's hard, right? It's so important to get that right. And I mean, we by no means have gotten it right, right? Like we miss sometimes. Sometimes for whatever reason, things might not work out with somebody. But for the most part, like I think that investing in the process of making sure that you do, proper interview process where you're kind of like vetting through the people. And obviously, depending on the role, there's going to be different, things to look for and things to kind of dive into. I think it's super important to do proper kind of reference and background checks. Obviously, if you ask somebody for references, they're going to provide references of people that know them, like them, and there's a 99% chance that they're going to give them a glowing, raving review and say they're awesome because it was self-provided, right? And I've always, especially in more, key leadership type roles, like tried to do my own background check and reference check on people and try to find like-minded or similar circles of connections of people that we mutually know and have either worked with them or know them really well, both as a person and a professional, because obviously the skill set professionally is really important, but just working with good people is important. And that's one thing that I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but I try to surround myself with people smarter than me. I try to surround myself with people that make me think outside the box, bring me outside of my comfort zone, that challenge me, that make me the best version of myself on a daily basis. And I'm constantly trying to grow as a professional, as a husband, as a father, as a leader. And you got to work at it, right? Like anything in life, you really have to just continue to work at it to perfect your craft and what you do. And it's doesn't matter if you're an athlete. I mean, you look at Steph Curry's out, working out, shooting, for hours at a day because he wants to be better, right? And that's why he's one of the best in the game. You look at Dustin Johnson, who's playing unbelievable golf right now. Like he's constantly practicing, right? Like he is constantly at the driving range with his coach, like working on little things and little adjustments to make him better. And it's no different with what we're doing, right? Like I need to be better. Our team needs to be better. There's always room for improvement. And I think if you find like really good people that are grounded, that's something that you can start to build a company around. If some of the, I think you asked the question, but some of the traits or skills and whatnot that we look for are people that are team players, people that aren't afraid to collaborate, people that, I love loyalty, people that, like I said, I've worked with in some cases for 10 plus years. I mean, like we're kind of like a family, you spend more time with the people you work with than you do your family or friends. And so I think it's important to trust, respect. And not everybody has to be best friends, but just like collaborate, come together and let's build something special.
Yeah, man, that's a great approach. I agree with everything you said there. And I think that, that commitment to growth, just one step after another is so key. So shifting to a question around, so you guys, I know, have raised a bunch of money, both for Step and previously. And I think when I think about the listenership on the show, there's a lot of people that are just interested in discovering new brands, but there's also a ton that are either aspiring founders or actually founders today and really benefit from the tactile advice. So when you think about, what are some of the biggest lessons learned that you've taken away from investor pitches, either positive or, ones you got burned on that you learned?
Yeah. So I think a couple things. Fundraising's hard, right? It's one of those things where you've got to have a lot of things have to line up for an investor to be willing to cut any size check. It's money, right? And an investor's job is to make money. And, an investor's job is to say no. Like, they get pitched thousands of, and venture capitalist gets pitched thousands and thousands of times a year. And, depending on the size of the fund or the firm, like, they can only make, a handful or a dozen investments at most. And so from a probability and percentage wise, they're saying no to most people. So I think a few things kind of stand out both from my experience and I have a lot of friends that are both investors and entrepreneurs. One is persistence, right? Like, you've got to be able to take a no, and you've got to be able to not get let down by that, right? Because not everybody's going to share the same vision as you, or not everybody's going to understand, what you see or what your, goals and plans are, because they haven't been thinking about it as much as you have. So I think it's super important to be persistent. I think it's super important to be humble, right? Like, understand your strengths, understand your weaknesses, build around that. That's where you can add additional teammates that, can help you grow and can help your company grow. I think that that's important. I think, being realistic. I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs that think, oh yeah, I'm going to go raise a $20 million round, or I'm going to go raise $5 million for my seed. And in some cases that may be the case, but, I often talk to a lot of entrepreneurs or investors where their expectations are just not necessarily realistic. And so that's where part being humble and part being realistic, I think, come into play of just, understanding where you're at, in your journey. Because if you're shooting up here and you're never going to get there, that can be very discouraging, right? If you're shooting for here, you still got to work to get there. But if you're being realistic, you can get to here, but it's a process, right? You can't just jump the steps. You got to actually kind of like go through the work. There's smart money and dumb money. Like, there's a lot of people that will just cut checks and do a spray and pray model and just will put a lot of bets out there. But, are they going to necessarily help you when the going gets tough, or where you need, maybe some additional support on the investment side? In some cases, yes. And in some cases, no. But really understanding your investor and who they are, I think is important, especially as you get to later stage companies and you're talking at board levels. And, if I told you that every day was peachy and we knew exactly what was going to happen and we had no issues or problems across our business, like, I'd be lying, right? Like, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. It's very, very hard to build a company. It's very hard to raise money. But, those are some of the key things that kind of like jump out, but happy to dive in and talk more about it because I love this stuff.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, we could probably have a whole podcast just on fundraising
sure.
and investor lessons. I want to be able to get you out of here. So I want to shift to the next topic, which is I'm calling it the wellness corner. And I think you're a great person to answer these questions because you seem super active. And obviously with the athletics background, this is probably in your DNA, but I think of wellness as kind of a stack. So combining fitness, nutrition, sleep, mindfulness, I think it all works together and compounds. And so I'm kind of, this huge proponent of the modern health stack and the way that things are changing. So what I'd love to do is I'll give you a couple of different aspects of overall wellness and just share, have you share kind of your thoughts on it, what you do throughout the day, and if there are any products or brands that you use consistently.
Cool. Sounds good.
So the first one is morning routine. Do you have a routine set, and kind of how do you start your day typically?
COVID's thrown a little bit of a curveball into my normal routine, but I'm a morning person, right? So I get up early, start the day. I usually get up and, basically first thing I do is check my email and make sure that, I'm on top of A, what's going on in the world, and B, what's going on in my business, and make sure that there's, nothing absolutely pressing that needs to be done right away, in the few hours that I might get of sleep. And so I get up, check my email. I'm a huge, overall wellness proponent of a balanced lifestyle. Like, I've been into fitness my entire life, and for me, it's obviously I want to take care of myself physically. I want to be healthy for my family. I want to take care of myself, but with that, there's the mental aspect, right? Like, for me to be able to go for a run or go for a bike ride, a lot of times that's where I clear my head. I do a lot of thinking and stuff like that. So I usually start off my day with, I get up, check my email. I'm usually at the gym, at 5:15 in the morning to get a workout in. And for the most part, a lot of the world is sleeping, and so there's less distractions for me where I can get that workout in, where I can clear my head, and ultimately just kind of start my day. I feel so much better when I do that. I try, after I work out, if I don't have a meeting, I try to come back and have breakfast with my kids before I go to work. Obviously, with COVID, like I said, schedules are shifted because we've been virtual since March. But that's what I would do is I'd come home and have breakfast with my kids and then basically really get after it. There's no typical day. There's no 9 to 5 for me. There's some things that come up throughout the day that I just were unexpected or could have never seen coming. So, the idea of, I'm going to work out after work or I'll work out later, it just never happens for me because something's always coming up. And so I try to, start my day off like that. And then, once I have breakfast with my kids, just dive into it.
Yeah, the workout thing is something I'm battling with. I'm not traditionally a morning person, so I always would default to those like 6 p.m. workouts. But you're so right that there's always something. There's always a late meeting or something, and then it gets pushed. Then you feel horrible. It starts the cycle over.
Yeah, I get a call from you. Call me and say, "Hey, I'm in town from New York. You want to go grab a drink?" And I'm like, "Of course, I'm going to take this opportunity. You're in from New York for a night. Like, I can work out tomorrow, right?" But
yeah.
Or, "Hey, you want to go to the Warriors game?" Like, of course, I want to go to the Warriors game. Like, I'm going to take that opportunity.
Yeah, that happens every night.
It happens all the time. And so, like, I just learned, and I've always kind of been a morning person, but I just learned, like, I'll do it later or I'll do it after work, or I'm too tired, I don't feel well, I'm not going to get up this morning. Like, the amount of times, like, I've had to, like, talk myself into just get up. I know you don't want to, but get up. Like, you will feel better. And every time I do, I feel 1,000 times better. One area that I am not good at is committing to sleep, right? Like, because sleep is part of that, right? And historically, I don't sleep a lot. My brain's wired. I'm always thinking. I'm usually doing work late at night and kind of jamming on something. And a lot of times it's late, or very early morning before I actually go to sleep. But then I still get up in the morning. And so that's one area that I've tried over the last couple of years to just be better at, because I know how important sleep is to the overall wellness aspect of life. But it's an area that, I definitely need to be better at, because, it's sleep, it's working out, it's eating well, in moderation. I'm a huge foodie, but like, you got to eat well, you got to take care of yourself. And ultimately, I think that extends to your personal and professional life of just being, having more energy and being better at what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Definitely. I think there's a gene where like maybe 10, I don't know the percentage, but maybe 10% of the people in the world only need like 4 hours of sleep. The rest of us on average, like 6 to 7, you might have that gene, because if you're burning at both ends and you're not feeling it after a few days, then you probably have it.
I at least that's kind of the schedule. And, I don't know if I have the gene, but that's kind of how I've lived my life for the most part, is off of very little sleep. I don't drink coffee. I don't drink caffeine. I'm kind of wired, that way. But like I said, I as we get older, I think it's more important to make sure we're taking care of ourselves and stuff. So I'm trying to be better about it, trying to get more sleep and live a well-balanced life overall.
For sure. Yeah, so we double clicked into a bunch of already. I had one about nutrition, fitness, and sleep. So we covered those. The last one that I want to touch on is, I'll call it the content diet. So, on a micro level, like newsletters and daily consumption, and then maybe weekly, and then maybe books long term. Do you have anything that you go to consistently within content?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Part of my starting my day, but I don't get it till about probably 7 o'clock, 7:30 every morning. So I'm usually done working out. But I have a good friend that writes a newsletter every day, 7 days a week, and it's kind of a high level snapshot of, call it, what's going on in. It's more the venture kind of business world, more tailored to like what I do, but it's just a wealth of information where I get this newsletter that's very well laid out. And it's basically tidbits of like what's going on with TikTok and Oracle, right? It's like what's going on with Chime just raised money. But the interesting thing is everything that's in there is just hitting the wires that morning. So instead of having to go like at each, go find the stuff or hear about the stuff, I kind of get this like, summary of briefing. And then if I want to dive deeper, then I can go search and figure out like what's going on. That's just been a huge advantage and a content, kind of like blessing for me to just understand like what's going on in my world. Cause, he kind of hits it, all the things that I'm curious and interested about, like I can read about and then dive into if I want to. So that's been great. There's certain publications like I read TechCrunch on a daily basis, trying to understand what's going on in kind of the technology and venture world. So I read that. There's various, I'd say, books and podcasts over time that I don't do on a regular basis, but if there's an interesting topic, that I find, I'll listen or read or dive into like what's going on. Try to stay up, current times, what's going on in the world, what's going on in business, what's going on in my industry. So I can apply that to my everyday life and our business, and make sure that, we're aware of what's going on out there.
Awesome. Yeah. What's that newsletter called? We can give some press to him.
It's a private newsletter. So it's something that's not promoted or whatnot. It's a friend of mine that writes it for a very select group. There's no name and I'm not sure.
No way to get it.
Yeah, you can't get it, but it's very valuable and I'm thankful that he does it.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. All right, cool. Final two questions for you. We ask these to every single guest, so pumped to hear your take on these ones. So the first one is the Startup Manifesto. If you had to write a startup manifesto with 5 of the most important key lessons or pitfalls to avoid when starting out, what would they be?
Yeah, that's a tough one, especially to narrow it down to 5. I think the first one would be persistence. I think I mentioned that earlier, but I think, you're going to face a lot of adversity no matter what you do. Being persistent in your everyday life and business, I think is super important. So that would be number one. I think the second one, is, I mentioned this, but if it were easy, everyone would be doing it, right? Like life is not easy. Business is not easy. Doing a startup is not easy. Raising money is not easy. So, I think where you can really separate people is, in that work ethic that we talked about earlier. Persistence is obviously part of that, but really not taking the traditional path and, doing things your way and ultimately standing behind, what you believe in. So I think that would be the second one. The third one would be the people, right? Like I said earlier, surround yourself, with people smarter than you. Surround yourself with people that make you a better person. I think that that's really important to get that right. I talked about understanding your strengths and weaknesses, but the people aspect of building a business is so important. And I can't tell you how fortunate I am to be able to work with like awesome people, especially at Step. The next one would be execution. Execution's key, right? Like people have great ideas, but can you actually execute on them? That's a big difference. And so staying, being able to execute is a key lesson that I've learned kind of over the years. And the last one would be sacrifice, right? Like you've got to make sacrifices in life. You've got to make sacrifices in business. And some of that might be a sacrifice on your mental wellness or health, right? Like it's not forever if it's a lifestyle, but like you've got to be able to make sacrifices. You've got to be able to, be flexible and adjust to situations. And I think that that's really, really important because sometimes people only have a lens of looking one way. And unfortunately, life, business, and especially the startup world is nothing like that. And so, I mean, those are kind of the 5, I'd say, key lessons that I've learned in terms of Startup Manifesto.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that. It's a great list. To the last point, I mean, it seems like founders are juggling so much. Like you have 2 hands and there's 40 balls in the air. Like it's just impossible to be able to do everything. You have to be flexible and bend. So I totally agree with that. And then the second question is nomination. So Kevin Gould of Combo nominated you, which we were super thankful for. And this has been just a fantastic way for the show to grow. So it's your turn to nominate another founder that's either a friend, colleague, or mentor of yours that you would like to see on the show in the future.
Yeah, my buddy Woody, he's a 5-time entrepreneur now. He's a CEO and founder of a company called Extend. And they're doing really cool stuff with warranty and being able to offer, digital online warranty for physical products and online products. Very close friend of mine, awesome entrepreneur. He's got a super exciting, company called Extend. I think he'd be an awesome addition to the show. So I can introduce you to him, and you guys should definitely check out Extend. It's a great product.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you for that so much. Before we let you go, I'd love to just acknowledge you for a second. I'm obviously hosting these conversations, but just as a consumer and fan, listening to your story, I think for you, you're incredibly down to earth and balanced. And, if people take nothing away from this conversation other than that, I think it would be an inspiring message. You've been able to handle so much. You seem, like a huge family man, big into fitness. You're big into your hobbies, and you've been able to grow multiple businesses and exit. And so I think that's super inspiring. And so I just want to thank you again for coming on. I'll be a huge fan of you and Step in the future, and wish you the best.
Well, that means a lot. I really appreciate it. Huge fan of the show and really appreciate you having me, and look forward to keeping in touch. And hopefully when COVID's done, we can hang out in person sometime.
For sure. Yeah. Looking forward to it. CJ MacDonald, founder of Step. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. Have a great day. Stay safe.
Thank you for listening to that episode with CJ MacDonald of Step. If you're loving the show and want support, there's a couple of quick, completely free things you could do that would really help us out. 1, subscribe to our show on Apple Podcasts. If you go on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a 5-star rating and a couple sentence positive review on why the show inspired you. 2, follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Founder Podcast. Each week we put out teasers, audio clips, and important quotes from the episode. And lastly, check out our website as a mission control for the show. Go to thefounderpod.com. We have a page on there called Special Offers where we link up discount codes from our founders' companies, as well as all the books and resources they've recommended. I hope you enjoyed that episode and are looking forward to the next one. Until then, I'm Kallaway, and this is The Founder.